This is actually my diary from my very first day at SVU. Dear Diary, I felt so nervous walking into the crown jewel of the NYPD. And then I had the pleasure of being introduced to Detective Cassidy and Munch. I thought, this has to be a mistake. This can't be SVU. Maybe traffic enforcement or post office security.
Prick me, Olivia. Do I not bleed?
Well, I have to admit that I did underestimate you at first, but over time, I realized that Detective Munch was not only a brilliant detective, but a very, very soulful man. I will miss you very much, John Munch.
Olivia Benson, ladies and gentlemen, she'll be here all week. We're done here yet because I have a party with some of my more important friends. And I see a couple of my ex-wives are here. They want to have a three-way. Fortunately, it's with my brother David. Story of my life. Nice.
Believe me, John, none of us want to be here any more than you do. So before we all leave and go home to our families, we were all hoping that, like a good soldier, you would just fade away. But what I do know is our loss is the DA's loss. Because I just learned that in a couple of weeks, Sergeant Munch is going to begin the third, or is it the fifth act, by becoming a special investigator with the DA's office.
In New York City, sexually based offenses are considered especially heinous. These are their stories.
Hey guys, welcome to an emergency podcast of Munch My Benson. My name is Adam. I'm here in New York. I'm joined in by Josh. Now, we got some sad news earlier today being Sunday, the 19th of February, and that is our very own John Munch. Richard Belzer passed away, I believe, at his home in the south of France.
It was, yes.
Yeah, so I suppose on that level, you can tell that you've made it somewhere when you're at your estate in the south of France, passing away. So good on him for that. But we thought that we should do a special Munch episode, this being the first time this has happened. The first SVU cast member to pass away, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. And definitely one that's near and dear to our hearts. So I know Josh has prepared some notes. So
obviously we don't spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about the stars of the show, the main cast. Yeah. But it seems fitting that today we would talk about Richard Belzer. The man, the legend.
Yeah, the font of the greater Munchiverse. I mean,
indeed. So Richard J. Belzer was born on August 4th, 1944 in Bridgeport, Connecticut to salesman Charles Belzer and his wife, Frances. His mother beat both him and his older brother Len in People magazine. I'll have links to all of these articles in the sources for the show notes. In People magazine in 1993, Len Belzer said, "Our mother didn't know how to love her sons appropriately. She always had some rationale for hitting us." Richard added, "My kitchen was the toughest room I ever worked. I had to make my mom laugh or I'd get my ass kicked." Now, Frances died from breast cancer when Richard was 18. His father, who was the much more caring and fit parent, attempted suicide 3 years after his wife's death. Richard walked into his father's office and found him slumped over his desk, overdosed on pills and booze. And Richard saved Charles's life. But a year later, in 1968, his dad succeeded in killing himself. Having already gotten kicked out of Dean Junior College for organizing protests, Richard Belzer worked as a census taker, dock worker, jewelry salesman, and a number of other random things before beginning work as a reporter for the Bridgeport Post. But his dreams of becoming a serious writer were pushed to the back burner as he started dealing drugs and carrying guns. In 1971, as his first marriage to Gail Susan Ross was winding down, and after beginning psychoanalysis, he came to terms with all the tragedy that had befallen him. God damn it. And he decided to take a risk and try comedy. He answered an ad in the Village Voice for an audition with the East Village Comedy Troupe Channel 1. They called their show GrooveTube, mocking the television world. Their theater shows elicited a strong enough response to net them a film deal, which became the very adult sketch-filled film, a mouthful, GrooveTube, which featured Belzer's film debut along with that of Chevy Chase. Of GrooveTube, the film, Belzer told the AV Club, "We were very high when we wrote it, when we shot it, when we premiered it, and when we realized we'd made a movie." It was truly underground in the sense that before it was a movie, we had a little theater and we showed GrooveTube on 3 monitors in a 90-seat theater. So for people to pay to see television before cable, it was pretty innovative. GrooveTube ended up influencing Saturday Night Live, with Chase's Weekend Update anchor owing a lot to the news anchor segment in GrooveTube. Now, Chase wasn't in that segment of the film, but the signature sign-off line that Chase used on SNL, "Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow," is from GrooveTube. At this time, Belzer also began performing on National Lampoon Radio Hour in 1973, alongside Chevy Chase, John Belushi, Gilda Radner, Bill Murray, and Harold Ramis. During this time, he'd moved in with singer Shelley Ackerman. His divorce was finalized in, 71 or 2? 72. And he started doing stand-up at Pips, the Improv, and Catch a Rising Star. When SNL began, he was the warm-up comedian and appeared in a few sketches in the early years. But Belzer insists that Lorne Michaels had told him that he would work Richard Belzer into the cast, only to renege on the promise. That's sort of a... Lorne Michaels would not comment in when people ran that. So in 93, Lorne Michaels still wouldn't talk about it. Belzer married boutique manager Dahlia Danoch, D-A-N-O-C-H, in 1976, but the marriage lasted just 2 years. During this time, Belzer claimed to have indulged in, quote, "just about every drug in the world, things people have never even heard of, and I'm not kidding," end quote. He snorted heroin and cocaine and dropped Quaaludes. At this time, 2 of his close friends were Freddie Prinze and John Belushi, the former committing suicide while fucked up on drugs in 1977, and the latter overdosing in 1982 on an intravenous speedball, despite an avowed aversion to needles the night after he'd been visited by Richard Belzer at his Los Angeles apartment. So Belzer had been with him the night before he died. In 1981, so right before the Belushi suicide, Belzer met Harley McBride, a former Playboy model and actress known for starring in Young Lady Chatterley and Young Lady Chatterley 2. They moved in with one another.
Nice.
Yeah. They moved in with one another, and her 2 teenage daughters lived with them also. And this happened shortly after they met. He suffered a bout of testicular cancer in 83 and 84. And then the pair married in 1985. Fame and riches eluded Belzer through the 80s as he managed just minor film roles, often as little more than a featured host or stand-up. While his contemporaries like Robin Williams, Chevy Chase, and Steve Martin were all getting filthy rich.
Yep.
Then in 1993, John Munch happened.
Yep.
Homicide: Life on the Street executive producer and director of the pilot, Barry Levinson, heard Belzer on Howard Stern and told Tom Fontana that he thought Belzer was the right person for the acerbic conspiracy theorist John Munch, who was based on real-life Baltimore detective Jay Landsman, who was featured in David Simon's book, Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets. Of Belzer and People, Levinson said, I heard him on the Howard Stern show, and he wasn't just telling jokes. He was smart, and he had an attitude. I wondered if I could take that and put it into the Munch character. A lot of comics who go into acting kind of do it winking at the camera, but Richards, and they're doing it as an actor. And in a later Television Academy interview, Levinson added, we were looking at some other actors, and when I heard him, I said, why don't we find out about Richard Belzer? I like the rhythm of the way he talks, and that's how it happened. When the critical darling Homicide was canceled after 7 seasons, Belzer wasn't ready to hang up the character of John Munch, so he reached out to Dick Wolf, having heard that Benjamin Bratt was leaving Law & Order, the original series, and wondered if he might not work as Lenny Briscoe's new partner. They teamed up in a couple of crossover episodes, but Wolf had already cast Jesse L. Martin to replace Bratt. He did, however, like the idea of adding Munch to the cast of characters on the Law & Order sister series that he was developing at the time, Special Victims Unit. Belzer appeared in the main cast of SVU for the first 14 seasons before riding off into the sunset in 2013 with season 15, episode 5, Wonderland Story, which will be featured both in the intro and again probably after this bio section.
Yeah.
Now, that episode featured his going away party. That's the clip that's going to be dropped in, although it's really long, so I'm having to cut it in half. We discussed that episode at length in Munch My Benson episode 80. Keep on munching Munch. So if you want to hear more about that, that's where that is. All told, Belzer appeared as John Munch in 122 episodes of Homicide, the Homicide TV movie, 1 episode of The X-Files, 4 episodes of the original series, 1 episode of Law & Order Trial by Jury, 1 episode of The Beat, 1 episode of Arrested Development, 1 episode of The Wire, 1 episode of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, 1 30 Rock as John Munch in an SVU within the 30 Rock episode, but the SVU stuff was written for 30 Rock. Like, it wasn't. Interesting. Yeah, they didn't just clip out something. Like, they'd filmed part of an SVU with John Munch. And then he was also in 326 episodes of SVU. So that's a total of 459 appearances across 10 shows.
Damn.
In 2014, Belzer's brother Len, the former producer of the radio show The Comedy Hour, leapt from the roof of his Upper West Side apartment building, unable to move past the grief from the death of his wife, Sesame Street director Emily Squires. Richard Belzer settled a $5 million lawsuit for a reported $400,000 in 1990. The lawsuit was with Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, Vince McMahon, and the World Wrestling Federation. This happened after they were all on his short-lived Lifetime talk show Hot Properties to promote WrestleMania 1. Hogan choked out Belzer in a front shin lock and
now, Belzer goaded him on.
He did. He did. But then when you watch Hogan drop Belzer, like, Belzer is limp, and and Hogan just like drops him and walks away. And when he dropped him, Belzer hit his head and blood was drawn. Belzer he bragged about this, R.I.P. Belzer used the settlement money as the down payment on his house in Beaulieu-sur-Mer in the southwest of France, where he died on Sunday, February 19th, 2023. Per longtime friend, Letterman scribe, and novelist Bill Sheft, Belzer, quote, had lots of circulatory and respiratory issues, and his last words were, "Fuck you, motherfucker," which is delightful.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been kind of like reminiscing about some of my favorite Belzer moments over the years. Of course, if you haven't seen there's a Comedy Central Chevy Chase roast.
Oh yeah,
that is definitely worth checking out. The big punchline is that Belzer says Chevy Chase didn't have a funny bone in his body unless I was fucking him in the ass.
Yeah, that one's beautiful. So, in a turn befitting John Munch, for much of the day on Sunday today, people on Twitter insisted that Richard Belzer had not died and that it was all an internet hoax. I'm sure he'd love that. Belzer is survived by his wife, Harley McBride, his 2 stepdaughters, Bree and Jessica Benton, and his legacy, which includes his novel, I Am Not a Cop, where a fictionalized version of himself investigates a murder, and the 5 conspiracy theory books he wrote or co-wrote. And I'm going to list those off right now because they sound awesome. UFOs, JFK, and
crazy.
Elvis. Conspiracies you don't have to be crazy to believe. Dead Wrong, straight facts on the country's most controversial cover-ups, which was co-written by journalist David Wayne and was a New York Times bestseller. Hit List, an in-depth investigation into the mysterious deaths of witnesses to the JFK assassination, which was also co-written by David Wayne and was a New York Times bestseller. This is, of course, not David Wayne, the director of Wet Hot American Summer. This is a journalist, David Wayne. Wayne spelled like Bruce Wayne's last name. Corporate Conspiracies, How Wall Street Took Over Washington, which, that happened. Someone is hiding something. What happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370?
I'm pretty sure we know exactly what happened to it.
Co-written by David Wayne and longtime Coast to Coast AM radio talk show host George Noory. And then Bill Sheff is working on a documentary on Belzer, so we should hopefully get a fitting tribute to the man, the legend, in the not-too-distant future.
Apparently he was a regular guest on Alex Jones's talk show as well in later years, so he definitely kind of went down the rabbit hole, I guess.
He was always down the rabbit hole, though.
Before we let you go, I want to thank you, partner. Munch taught me a lot. He taught me that Oswald never fired a shot. He taught me he probably never landed on the moon. And that Hoover had a gay hit squad. All true. But I want to say something to you. I love you and I'm going to miss you, man.
Oh, thank you.
That's what's... And we got something for you.
A shadow box. Oh, look. Yeah, that's good.
It's your NYPD shield.
Wow.
And your Baltimore shield.
No. We ran his butt out of B-more.
Have a seat, gentlemen. Now, what I have to say tonight doesn't come from here. It comes from here. But don't cry for me. Actually, Liv, you can cry. I mean, Liv is the heart of SVU, and Finn is the pancreas. 12 years in, I show Finn a report. A rapist strikes somewhere in America every 2 minutes. Finn says to me, Munch, we got to catch this guy. And when I first saw Amaro, I realized I'm still the best-looking guy in the squad. But one good thing about it, it's kind of a blessing. Now in the squad room, we have someone who's even more paranoid than I am. So thank you, Nick.
What do you mean?
And Cap, I know what you're saying to yourself tonight. Ask not for whom mandatory retirement tolls. It tolls for thee. I've known
We
this
gotta
man
go.
for 15 years.
I'll tell you on the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Mother Teresa of SVU is leaving. Was it something I said?
No, John, it's everything you said.
Well, I haven't even gotten to the Cassidy jokes yet. You know, I see you two together. I think you both could do better.
Yeah, it's a real fucking bummer, you know?
It is. I mean, obviously, Munch is part of our name, and he's part of kind of everything. Everything that we do on this podcast is kind of revolving around the fact that there's this character that's kind of like been in all these different places, and so it allows us to have fun with reading those IMDb pages and doing all this other stuff. And also, it's just he's such a like fun character in definitely in Homicide and in SVU, but it's just it's definitely a tragedy. But
I think there's also a fair amount like. I think if there were a character to whom this podcast would have like a kindred spirit or a spirit animal or whatever the hell, a mascot, it would be Munch. Like, I mean, it kind of has. He's the one that's kind of the zaniest main character. I think. And the weirdest, and like, we go on weird fucking dives, like we're weirdos. I mean, what character gives us cause to talk about fucking Chappaquiddick, or it's Munch. Yeah, it's Munch, or phrenology. Like how can we tie in Men at Work? Yeah, how can we tie in Men at Work to this episode? And it's through phrenology and it's through Munch. So he's definitely. I agree. He's definitely kind of our spirit animal here. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Mariska's the star. Elliot was the previous star, but Munch is kind of the crazy, deep diving, withered black heart of the show. and of this podcast. But yeah, it's, I don't know. Like, I was watching old stand-up clips and, he definitely was his own thing, like kind of always. And that he found a fucking niche. And like way after the fact, way after all of his contemporaries had already Chevy Chase's career was already in the toilet by the time he was
exactly his Munch. His contemporaries were either dead or had made fools of themselves, had made nothing but trouble,
But yeah, to have his weird later career success, it's almost like he was the proto Mark Maron in a weird way, where Maron didn't really get success until he was in his 50s.
Yeah, until he started doing a podcast. That doesn't happen to other people.
No, trust us. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have that much more to say other than that, Well,
he's a legend. And I think it's honestly, for our podcast, there's always these kind of weird time synchronicities. The episode that just most recently dropped, so this is going to drop tomorrow, so there'll be a new one. But the one that dropped last Monday, Stocks and Bondage, was an all-time great Munch episode.
Indeed.
Which, among other things, has that delightful courtroom scene. It's the one with the courtroom scene where Munch is describing the Dasadi and shit, right? Or am I thinking of a different season 1 episode that we watched recently? Where he's talking about autoerotic asphyxiation, I think.
But it wasn't in court.
There's one where there's just a random one-off court scene with Munch.
That was a different one. That was the other season 1. Yeah, that was the other 1/8, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Which was also a delightful episode. But Stocks and Bondage was a really fun one. They go to this one.
They go to a kink shop. It's amazing.
They go to a kink shop, and it's a fun Cassidy one too. But we just love this guy, and obviously, I think that we both kind of wish, the way rights work in Hollywood means that I think Munch, the character on SVU,
got phased out way too early.
Exactly. Yeah. Didn't get to shine as much as we maybe wished he had because David Simon and company was getting paid.
Well, it was David Simon very specifically. It was David Simon had to get paid because he's based on Jay Landsman, who's a character in the book. Yeah. So Munch was the one character in the series. Well, I guess maybe not the one character in the series, but obviously he's dating back to the book. Yeah. And so he's dating back to David Simon's work, his reportage. And so he was
basically
cutting into the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly.
Which sucks because Munch is fucking awesome.
Exactly.
And I guess I should probably mention that in the newest episode, the episode that dropped, the real life episode that dropped on Thursday, Finn gave a little breakdown of what Munch is up to, and that's how this episode is going to end. It's going to go out on that clip. Nice. But it sounds like Munch had a nice final act that the character of Munch is still running a bar in Baltimore. But
Nice.
he went back to Baltimore.
Oh, he did open the bar in Baltimore.
He rebought the old bar that he'd run. Yeah.
Nice.
And he married a divorced rabbi.
Well, that's delightful. I think that's a good point to say. Keep on munching, guys. That's what we say at the end of every episode. And
keep on munching.
We mean it.
Yeah. Get consent first, though.
Yeah. R.I.P.
So you regret coming downtown?
Me? Nah. I got nothing better to do.
You're not fooling anybody. I see your armor.
Oh, humor, Finn.
See, I had a partner years ago, an old homicide detective. He had the same exact defense mechanism.
He still around?
Oh, he retired. Guess he just ran out of gas. Last I heard, he moved back to Baltimore. Met a divorced female rabbi.
A rabbi?
Yeah. And he bought back his old cop bar. It's about 1:30 a.m. He's probably cracking a joke to some barfly. That skinny bastard had a punchline for every second of the day.
Sounds like you miss him.
Not into nostalgia. I mean, that stuff's heavy. Brings you down.
Well, I'm flattered by the comparison.